Welcome to Circle Podcast, brought to you by Circle Sanctuary, one of the oldest nature spirituality churches in the United States, connecting people of nature-centered paths around the world. Join us throughout the week for a variety of shows discussing various topics, celebrating the divine in all of its forms through nature worship, rituals, education, and building bridges of community. Welcome to Urban Unwitches, a podcast to educate, inform, and expand the pagan community. Please join our Discord channel, Urban Unwitches Podcast. Follow us on TikTok at Urban Unwitches, and listen to all our past podcasts on your favorite podcasting platform. You can also join us on YouTube at Urban Unwitches. Now, back to the show. Hey, Kyler. We're doing another...
Again.
Hello again. Kyler and I are recording two podcasts on one day, and so if nothing looks like it's different in this podcast, there's a reason for that. We just got finished talking about the woo scale.
Yes.
And we were just saying that we really didn't cover all the stuff we hoped to cover, so we might do another woo scale one. If you liked it, you can always let us know by going to urbanunwitches@gmail.com or joining us on Discord at Urban Unwitches Podcast, and we'd be happy to see you there, and you could tell us what you'd like to hear and see us do in the future. Today, we're going to talk about common sayings, and the only banter I had was that I had to confess to Tony how much money I spent on JoAnne's closeout sale. I was like, there's going to be some packages. How many packages? A lot of packages. But it was like, it's because it was like pennies on the dollar. I bought 3 brand new clear totes for $1 a piece. 15 gallons. You just, I mean, I'm sorry. You can't. And I didn't even mention the amount of yarn I purchased for pennies on the dollar. There's a brand that I really like called Fisherman's Friend, which is a wool blend, and it's very soft. It makes really great gloves and scarves, but it also makes really great warm blankets for the winter. And it is very expensive. I don't get to play with it as much as I want to. And it was on sale, three skeins of it for $2. And I was like, I just cannot pass that up. I just can't. So I bought quite a bit of it. And then my daughter-in-law, because my son got married, I'm very excited about it, said that they wanted to get married in winter. Because I said, hey, if you're really looking for a dress, I could crochet you one. And she was like, well, I'm not really interested in that, but I do need a wrap that's really heavy to wear, because I know that the dress I want is going to have a sweetheart neckline without any straps. And I said, So I just bought a bunch of this yarn called Fisherman's Friend, and it would actually be warm, and I can make it pretty. So I'm very excited that I did that, because now I have something to do with it. But I was one of the blankets downstairs that Tony loves is really heavy, and it's an intricate Celtic woven design. It's really gorgeous. And I was like looking at it the other day. I was like, I think I want to make another one of these. This is really heavy. It's very nice. It looks really good. I enjoyed making it. So I'm also going to do that with some of my Fisherman's Friend. But I couldn't pass up 3 skeins for $2. I just couldn't. I'll never be able to buy that again. And I'm not sure how much of these brands are going away, because JoAnne's is going away. Right. Because so many brands are just JoAnne brand, if you will, and you won't find them anywhere else. And Fisherman's Friend, I'm worried, is one of those, because I haven't really looked to see who makes it or if it was an independent maker. So I'm very sad. I'm very sad. When I was at MomoCon, I saw this girl in a very cute outfit, and I said, I really love your outfit. She goes, thank you. The pattern was on Etsy. I said, oh, that's wonderful. I said, where did you get the really cool fabric? She said, JoAnne's. And she and I gave each other this look like, just sad. And her boyfriend or partner turned to me and said, oh my God, you have the same look she has when I mentioned JoAnne's. I was like,
It's a
yeah, we all
sadness.
have
Yeah.
that look. It's a
Yeah.
sadness. There's a sadness
Yeah.
that's happening because JoAnne's is going bye bye. So
I
sad.
had I was on a first name basis with literally every sweet older lady at the cutting table at both of the JoAnnes in Gainesville, Florida. I have bought hundreds, I mean hundreds of yards of fabric between myself and the projects I've done for other people over the years. Like
Hmm.
I've never actually been to a convention myself, but I've made more than 60 costumes for people who are
Hmm.
cosplaying. And I've been informed this year I'm not going to have a choice. I'm going to be drug kicking and screaming to a con. My husband firmly believes that if I'm going to sew this much, I should sew something for myself. And I'm like, but I don't want to. I want to sew. But I no longer have a choice. That has been taken away from me. So yeah, but I'm super sad. Like the one here in like we're in just north of Seattle. The one closest to me has already closed. And as I walked by and it was closed, something in my heart just kind of clenched. I'm like, no, so many hours of creativity just gone.
Yeah, it sucks. I'm very unhappy
Rough.
about it. Very, very unhappy about it. Um,
Yeah. So we are talking
okay.
about common sayings today, and we have a really fun list of common sayings. And it's funny how often these get used, and some people just have no idea where they came from, which is pretty common. Like there's a lot of things that we have in just everyday life that nobody has any idea where it came from. And it may actually mean something very different than what the common understanding is.
Right. Yep. I like it because some of the sayings actually go back in time quite a bit.
Hmm.
Um, and has found its way into modern pagan culture without people really understanding what it means or where it comes from or how it
Hmm.
got to modern pagan culture. And that's why I like looking at common sayings because it talks a lot about our past and our history and kind of gives us an understanding of those things. And I really am excited about that. Um, so I say we dive in with the most common of common sayings. So mote it be, as my son used to say it,
Yes.
smote it, smote it, smote it, he would say. So mote it be, where did that come from?
Well, so Mote It Be, first let's describe what it is. So Mote It Be is kind of as as my first teacher Poppy described it, it is the pagan amen. Mote It
Mm-hmm.
Be is the hiya in your karate chop. It is the exclamation of intent and finality that seals your intention and kind of completes a working. It brings things to a close, closes and expands that circle out to manifest. So it's basically the exclamation point on the end of your sentence.
Okay. Where did it come from, though?
The first time I encountered this was uh so Mote It Be, to the best of my knowledge, actually came from Gardner. Now, I could be very wrong about this because that is one that I haven't actually researched a whole lot, but it is actually in Gardner's like Book of Shadows, that
Mm,
was passed down, and the Encyclopedia de Magique. So that it is one of the most common sayings in all of Wicca.
cool. You said it's the pagan amen, so I have a funny story about this. At my wedding, my side of the wedding, those who know me don't know I don't speak to my biological family, but I was blessed with a big pagan community at the time that were all on my side of the um, aisle, and then Tony's family was pretty same amount on the other side of the aisle. And so the priest who was marrying us, Richard Sells, um, did the tying of the knot and held the knot up and said, "So mote it be." And everybody on my side said, "So mote it be." And everybody on the other side jumped out of their skin because they didn't know what was going on. It was quite funny. And I remember giggling at how funny it was that all the Christians jumped out of their chair because they didn't know you were supposed to say, "So mote it be." Well, then fast forward years later, I go to a funeral for one of my covenors. Basically, their adoptive son had um, unalived himself. And in that process, when the preacher they had hired to do the funeral came, he found out that he had unalived himself and refused to do the service. And so they were
Hmm.
like, who's going to do the service? Who's going to do the service? And my covenor said, she will. And so I was like, okay. So I remember that then spending a lot of time meditating and looking. Luckily, I have a priestess book, and I was flipping through my priestess book, finding things to use in this sermon I was supposed to give real quickly. And one of the things I decided was that I was going to be very blunt about the fact that people who unalive themselves often start a chain reaction, especially when they're teenagers, among other teenagers. And so I was just going to be really blunt. You guys need to watch out for each other now, because you don't want this to happen to someone else in this group. Because statistically speaking, you all at risk now for this happening to someone else in this group. So I'm saying this, and I'm trying to give this warning to these teenage kids that were there. And all of a sudden, everybody in the crowd went, "Amen!" And I jumped 3 foot straight up. It scared me so bad. I was like, "Whoa!" And then my governor, I was looking at her, and she has her head down, and she's just shaking in tears, and I'm feeling so bad, thinking that I have messed this up. And oh, I was so upset. And right after it over, I ran over to her. I said, "So sorry, I messed this up." And she looked up, and she had tears rolling down her face, and she was laughing. And she said, "You jumped so high! Oh my God, that was so funny." So Mote It Be.
So for people who do not know Dia, she is an extremely expressive human being, and when she is startled, it is never not dramatic.
Right.
I don't want to startle her because I don't want a heart condition, but at the same time, it's hilarious because it is always dramatic. I love it.
Yes. Yeah, so
Yes.
they laughed through the rest of the sermon, evidently, and I had not, they didn't think I had messed it up. They just couldn't stop laughing at me jumping out of my skin. So
Mhm.
Mote It Be. Where does Mary meet Mary part and Mary meet again come from? Because that's even a song.
That is a song. I
Mary
actually
meets and Mary part
Mary
and
part
Mary
and
meet
Mary
again.
me again. Yeah, so I actually heard this, the first instance that I ever heard of this, and again it could be wrong because some of these things it is really difficult to nail down,
Mm-hmm.
was actually from a poem a very, very long time ago, like the 1600s. A lot of what we use in Wicca today, even some of the like the archetypal symbols and all that, actually come out of British, Irish, Celtic
Mm-hmm.
literature and writing and
Mm-hmm.
ballads from centuries ago. So the earliest that I have seen this was actually, I think it was a poem, and I believe it was from the 16th century. Um, I could be, again, I could be wrong. So if somebody out there has more information on this, we encourage you, we implore you, send us this information because the etymology of these things is actually one of my hobbies, and some of them are ridiculous to find. And also, something just occurred to me, and I don't know how true it is on Mote It Be, that may have actually started with the Masons.
Mm.
Like it may have started with the Masons. I'm not 100% sure, but I have a friend who is a Mason who is also a Wiccan, and he mentioned something about it a long time ago, and it just popped in my head. So we could ask the great God Google
On it.
on it. Yay.
Oh. So Mote It Be is a phrase used by the Freemasons at the end of rituals that first appeared in the Regulus manuscript, also known as the Regius poem.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
and it's the oldest known Masonic document, which was written in 1390 AD. It said, "Amen, amen, so mote it be. So say we all for charity." There you go, 1390. I thought
Yeah.
it was a little older than Gardner. So,
I mean, so
and that
here's
makes
the
sense.
thing.
Gardner was a
Yeah.
Freemason.
Right, right, right. And the thing is, I'm gonna put this out in the world, and I do not want to make any Gardnerians angry at me because I think Gardner did a lot of many wonderful things. Gardner did not create ad hoc as many things as history would purport him to. We have over time discovered that a lot of them were repackaged, and then of course you had the influence of Doreen Valiente, who was a very creative woman, And that's how we get kind of the beautiful template that is the Wiccan philosophy, the Wiccan practice. But most of the things in the craft were assembled from much older sources from Gardner, and that's why so many of them, and also fleshed out from per people's familial and regional folklore practices, have found their way in and then become mainstream. That's why it's
Mm-hmm.
sometimes so hard to track some of the stuff down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we were
So the
talking
next,
about Merry Meet, Merry Part, Merry Meet Again.
mhm.
What you got for that?
So that's pretty much it. I don't know anything further on Merry Meet, Merry Part, Merry Meet Again, other than it came from that, and it was a very popular poem. And most poems in like the UK area eventually got put to limericks and music and all that at some point. The bardic traditions were really strong there. So how it found its way in, I'm not actually 100% sure. Do you know?
Nope, I don't. I'm not sure where that originally came from. I suspect it was some literature somewhere and
Hmm.
began to be a greeting. Because Mary, you say Mary meets people. I had one time I met the author Laurel K. Hamilton, and I had on a pentacle, and she said to me, "Mary meet," and I went, "What?" And she went, "Mary meet," and I went, "Okay." And she said, "Mary meet," and then looked at my chest, and I was like, "What's wrong with my, oh, I have a pentacle on. Mary meet. I get it now." Such an idiot sometimes. So,
Yeah.
so
The
that's
first
my
time
story
that
about Mary meet. I had no idea.
I have the exact same thing. My very first mentor, Poppy, she was the mother of my best friend in high school. She was really very much my first teacher. She gets on the phone because her son and I had just become friends. We were going to go out to, I think it was a concert or something, and she wanted to chat with this person that her son was going to go out with. And she gets on the phone, and I guess he had already passed on to her that I was Wiccan. I did not know that she was Wiccan, so totally out of context. I knew no other Wiccans at that point, or even any form of pagan. And so she gets on the phone and she's like, "Mary, meet." And I'm like, hi.
Right.
And she she laughed, and she did not have a, let's just say her laugh was not demure. It was a great big Irish German laugh, and it filled a space. And I definitely remembered that one for a while. She dined out on that story for a minute.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that. I have never been more embarrassed than I realized when I realized Laurel K. Hamilton was telling me she was pagan and I wasn't picking up on the hints.
Right.
It was really bad.
And I
Um,
swear, sometimes you name drop just to make me uber jealous, because I would give my left big toe to science for experiments to meet Laurel K. Hamilton.
Oh my
I've
God.
read every
I
book.
went to a con. I went to a con and
Mhm.
stood in line for 3 hours. So it wasn't like I didn't pay for it. I did.
Oh.
But yeah, I totally hate to meet Laurel K. Hamilton. No doubt about it. It was also when I realized she was poly because I could see the energy between her and her two bodyguards. And I was like,
Mm.
these people are a threesome. And my husband was like, you don't know that. And then a few weeks later on her Facebook group, she goes, "So what if I'm pagan? While I'm at it, I'm poly too." And I ran over to my husband and went, "See, I told you, I told you, I told you."
Tony has since learned that when Dia makes a declarative statement, don't push back. Just give it time to simmer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's Tony. When we had been together a year, looked at me and he goes, "I don't believe in psychics, but you're something."
That's right, dearest. I'm something.
That's right. So we
So,
have talked before on this podcast about how influential the book "Stranger in a Strange Land" is, and
mhm.
there are some terms that come out of "Stranger in a Strange Land" that are most notable. And one is sharing water. I've told this story before, how I went to a pagan event and someone asked me if I would like to share water, and Dick Sells said she didn't want to. And I
Yep.
thought they were just going to give me some water. And it turns out sharing water means to
No.
giggity, um, or to
Mhm.
have spicy sleep with them. And so there you go. It does not mean giving somebody a bottle of water. And so
Correct.
Dick was like, "That's what it means." And I went, "Oh, I don't want to do that." He goes, "I know." I was like, "Okay." So that's where
Yes.
sharing water comes from. What are some other ones? I didn't put on this list, and it should have been on this list. Grok.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Can I
Grok
do this
is
one pretty,
not on this
please?
list.
Please,
Oh,
please.
do Grok. Tell us what Grok
Okay.
means.
So I do want to preface this by saying my first ordination is with CAW, the Church of All Worlds, which was named in honor of the impact that this book, Stranger in a Strange Land, had. Now, they're one of the oldest neo-pagan platforms. They're interfaith, but it is a neo-pagan platform. And so these were terms I had to learn going into because they're pretty awesome concepts. So I have to say, I do not love that Grok has been purloined by the musketeer himself for his AI. I don't love that. Yeah, Grok is Elon Musk's AI system.
Oh,
That's what
I
he
hate
named it.
that.
I hate it in my DNA. I hate it. A friend sent me a link to you got to try this out. It's better than Chat GPT. And I was like, what is? And then I realized where it came from, and I'm like, you take this back, you take this link back, or we're not friends anymore. I
Oh
had
my
such an
God.
outsized response to it. So
No.
Grok,
He couldn't
so
Grok
Grok,
anything if he wanted to.
it's right.
Oh my
Oh my
God.
God, it drove me crazy. And
Sorry.
also, I did. Yeah, I've played around with the AI systems. I don't know that Grok is any better than ChatGPT, honestly. And I don't really
Right.
love any of them. They
Right.
hurt my heart that they exist. But so Grok is in a stranger in a strange land. Grok is a Martian word, and it means to understand something totally and utterly to its most essential components. So if you say, I grok this thing, you better make sure you understand its entire history because it means you have a complete understanding of it. And that I'm pretty sure is why Elon Musk used it for his AI platform.
Well, and grok, when I was coming up, was one of Richard Salz's favorite words. He would go, "You
Mm-hmm.
don't need to understand that. You need to grok that. You need to know
Mm-hmm.
that at a certain level." And he would say that about things like grounding and centering or
Mm-hmm.
shielding. You don't need to know what shielding is. You need to grok shielding. That's how important it is.
Right.
You need to know this on a almost cellular level, if you will, this understanding of what shielding means and what it is and how to
Mm-hmm.
do it and how to embody it. And so
Right.
grok to me has always been really great because Richard used it so often and applied it so liberally to things. He was a big
Mm-hmm.
grokker. Um,
So
the
just to toss one more thing into Grok, don't mean to
uh-huh,
cut you off there. There is a component to Grok too that, especially given the context that you just provided, is important to understand. When you Grok something, you don't just understand it, you take that knowledge into yourself. It becomes
right,
a part of the whole. And so when you're talking about grounding and centering and shielding, there is no better word for Dick to have used than Grok because
and
that
grok.
is a practice you live and breathe every day. So great word. It was in use a lot in the 60s and 70s and early 80s and then fell out of use as the book aged.
Right.
But it's definitely one I say we bring back and just take back from Elon. We may not have the copyright, but
I think we take grok back and own it for what it was originally. I also think that the other way to say grok is to say an in drinking is another way to say that. When you learn
yes.
something and you drink that into your soul and your soul knows that,
Mm-hmm.
we also call that in drinking in the craft. And that's another way to say grok. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know where in drinking came from other than the idea that when you're learning something, you take it into yourself as if you drink and then it becomes a part of you. So it's an in drinking. It's the best way I can think of where that came
Yeah.
from. But that is to me the other way to say grok is through I'm going to in drink this knowledge or whatever, this practice. Another one that comes out that used to be very, very popular in pagan circles was the god in me salutes the god in you, the goddess in me salutes the goddess in you. And that's another one that comes
Mm-hmm.
straight out of Stranger in a Strange Land. And
Mm-hmm.
do you want to explain what that actually means?
Yes. So this one's a little bit more complicated to unpack, and it's also it's got some other connotations to it. The understanding of this is kind of spilled over into other things. So like we're familiar with the term namaste, right?
Right.
Well, in the West, most people don't actually speak or they don't read and write in Sanskrit. They don't speak any of the Hindu dialects because Americans only really learn American. Um, But the idea of the divine in me saluting the divine in you, when most Westerners say namaste, that is what they're saying. They're saying the
Right.
divine in me honors the divine in you. That's not actually what namaste means. It's basically mean I bow to you, I honor you. The other concept of this comes from Stranger in a Strange Land. So Stranger in a Strange Land is basically a psychologist's breakdown of the human condition. To understand that, you have to understand that the Robert Heinlein was an incredibly intelligent human being, and he wanted to understand what makes man tick. And his science fiction was a vehicle with which he explored that. And this book is kind of understanding man in a vacuum. Somebody who's never been human has to learn what it means to be human from a totally alien perspective. And I think he did a great job of it. But in the book, a religion is created because it's the easiest way to get this wisdom across to people. And the divine in me, that which is born of the universe, the stardust within me, my most essential divine and sacred parts honor the same within you, because at the end of it, we are the same. You are divine, I am divine. We are each a drop of the divine, and together we are the ocean.
Right. We are the stuff of stars, and that is in
Yes.
all of us. And that is really what the divine in me salutes the divine in you. And then pagans would say the God in me salutes the goddess in you, the
Mm-hmm.
goddess in me salutes the God in you, so on and so forth. Very, very, very common. Um,
Mm-hmm.
is there any others from Stranger in a Strange Land?
So in drinking may actually have come from it.
Oh yeah,
I'm
you're right.
I think it may have. It's been I'll have to go back and look. Because there's a lot of terms that have the term in on the start of it, like indweller and all that. Um, I'll have to go back and look, but I think that one's ringing a bell. The problem is eventually you cram so much information into one cranium, and eventually things start leaking out. Like
Hmm.
I'm sure I've misplaced some of that specific information with Star Wars trivia, which is not at all as useful. Um, especially now that Legends isn't canon anymore. I just don't have the heart to clear the buffer, you know? Um, but yeah, so the other thing about sharing water, so sharing water does mean to giggity. It also is a specific practice, which
Yeah.
most people might find actually a little much for people you're just meeting. And it literally means to share a mouthful of water. And
Yep.
I do not engage in this physical practice. So just be aware, even if you have been assured that there is no giggity going to happen at an event and somebody asks to share water, again, it is not a bottle of water. There will be a sharing. But there are a couple of other things, but nothing that has pervaded the craft as much as those
Right.
have.
Right. I agree. So the next one is actually a term that dates back pretty far. And
Mhm.
it also means to have spicy sleep, and that's greenwooding. And when you greenwooded, you literally went out into the woods and did spicy sleep. And this is common at May Day was when they would do this. You would do the belt on May night. You would go out and May Eve night, and you would go out and have fun with your neighbors, and that was called greenwooding, and it was a way to symbolically help the land rejuvenate and replant and reseed is what it was about. Do you know how far back that goes? Because I certainly don't.
I don't know, but bear with me just a moment because I realized I didn't know the exact etymology of that as you were speaking. Let's see. Oh, Greenwood. So basically, Greenwood comes from Middle English. Oh, it literally is just one of those things you go out into the forest. So the
Okay.
term Greenwood actually comes from Middle English, which is, you know, a whole bunch of different languages thrown in together.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's literally just not as is not more complicated than that. You're going out greenwooding. That means you're going out to giggity in the forest.
Well, and it also reminds me of what do they call that now? The Japanese do this. They don't giggity with it, but they go out and drink in the forest. That has a term. It'll come to me later. It's very popular right now. What about Blessed Be?
So this one was actually I have been trying for years to find the exact source of this, and I cannot. I know that it came out of Telema and Hermeticism. It probably was somewhere in the Golden Dawn. This is something that Gardner brought to Wicca. We're not 100% sure where the first instance came from, but a lot of those communities were like intercommunal. A lot of people who
Yeah.
practice hermetic magics and telema and high ceremonial magics, all of that kind of came out of the late Middle Ages. And so it is basically the aloha, the shalom. It is the way in ceremonial situations to give blessing and hello, or goodbye.
Mhm.
So that one's
Um,
not too complicated.
that's not too complicated. Ordained of old. We hear this a lot, especially if you've been
Yeah.
reading the old craft laws. They say it a lot. We
Mhm.
are ordained of old. What the heck does that mean?
Made up.
Made up?
Made up. It's more important because it's got the on the end of the P. So ordained is this is someone trying to speak ye and thous and theys
Mm,
without fully understanding. Ordained is not really a word. I don't hate it as a word. It kind of rolls off the tongue. It feels official. Um, we are ordained of old. Okay, I mean you're ordained. That's fine. A or O, ordained is not even a word. Like I've researched this back to Middle English. It's always been ordained. It comes from a quasi-Germanic word, which I'm not going to insult the language by attempting to pronounce. But it's always been an O. I think the only place I ever saw it A was in the craft laws, I think it was.
Lady Shebas.
Yeah, Lady Sheba's craft laws. Yeah. I think that's literally the only place or the first place that I saw the A, and then of course other people copied it. Um, there's in modern craft practice, there is a lot of monkey see, monkey do, like passing on of
Yes.
things without really knowing where it comes from. One of my old teachers actually had a thoroughly phenomenal rant about this. I it was if I could do it any kind of justice, I would repeat it, but I can't because the level of just spiritual outrage that she has when she's in her cups is totally wonderful. But yeah, in the craft, only do something if you know why you're doing it and where it comes from. That was the number one piece of advice she ever gave me. If you're standing in a particular way because other people are standing in a particular way, you probably shouldn't. Richard James from Canada used to do what he called the dramatic penguin. He's like, you'll have people stand there and their arms are straight out and it looks like they're being like electrocuted, and he's like, why do people do that? Because the other people are doing it. Somebody thought it was a good idea and it's the 100th monkey thing and now everybody does it. He's like, you are not an electrocuted penguin, stop being dramatic. And that man was the purest form of a Pisces I've ever seen, and when he was over something, he was over it. It was hilarious.
Well, then we go to the age old debate. Is it athame, athame, or athame? How do you say it?
Well, I'm still stuck on pecan and pecan. So I truly, honestly, from my telomeres up, I do not care how people pronounce this. I pronounce it differently from one day to the next. I don't think it's right or wrong. You know, it's a magical knife. Like, here's the thing. If somebody is standing in front of you and they have a magic knife, don't correct their pronunciation. They have a magic knife. Like,
Amen.
so Mote It Be, sister.
Mote It Be.
Every time you say that reminds me of my friend Andrea when the second Hobbit movie came out, and she's like, "Come with me. We're gonna go see the Desolate Smug." And I lost it.
So this goes to you say besom.
I
I
say
say
Betham.
besom, you say besom. Which way is
Right.
it?
So we're what's called an American, which means we've taken the English language and we've hurt its feelings repeatedly. We've punched it right in its feelings. I recognize this. I honor this. I cannot bring myself to regularly say aluminium. It's aluminum. I recognize how it's spelled. I get it. I cannot say aluminium. Besom, besom. I still struggle not to put an E on the end of it. I don't know where that came from. I don't think I've ever seen it with an E, but my brain says an E
No.
should go here. I
Yeah.
know, I know, I know. I get it. I'm
Mm,
broken. I understand. I accept.
all right. So, and a besom or besom is a magical broom that's used
Hmm.
to cleanse energy, in case you've never heard this term. It's the same as one that's not on here. Speaking of tools, is the white handled knife. It's also
The
called a, wait,
bowling
bowline.
uh,
That's right. What's not on
or
here either?
bowline, because that's another
Bowline or
thing. Because,
bowline, right?
yep, yep.
But these are curved knives that are used to harvest
Hmm.
magical herbs. And I have
Yes.
one, my husband made me one, and they're called bowlines or white handled knives because typically
Hmm.
the bowline had a white handle and the athame or athame had a black handle. So that's how you had the black handle and white handled knives.
Do
Any
you know
more
the
tools?
connection? Do you know the connection why they're white and black handled?
No.
So some say that it comes from the pillars of severity and mercy. So if you look at the high priestess card, there's
Hmm.
a white and black pillar behind them that comes
Yeah.
out of Hermeticism. It's also a balance of the male and female, as well as the dogmatic
Mm.
and the instinctual, that divine under intuition that comes in. You'll find a lot of that, like in really traditional Wicca, there's this a heavy focus on the balance of the two binaries. Later, that balance has come to mean like the full spectrum of things, but that's where a lot of it came from, the honoring that we both have the divine masculine and the divine feminine in us. And
Oh,
when we're in those roles, we are there to be the perfect balance of one another.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I have never had a black handled athame. I've always had an
Mhm.
ornate handled athame, and I've never had
Mhm.
a white handled besom. I mean, a white handled bowling. I've always had a. It was made out of. Mine's made out of hardwood, so it is a
Mhm.
whiter. It is a lighter color, but it is not white. I don't know how you would naturally get a white handled bowling because you wouldn't want to paint it. It would rub off.
So there's a couple of ways. So you can do like a really bleached wood. You
Mm-hmm.
can, if you whitewash a wood and you rub it in enough, you can bleach it out. There's
Oh, okay.
also like sandstones. Like there is
Oh,
a
yeah.
sandstone that's really popular in the UK. It's easy to shape. And as long as you seal it, like it'll last a pretty good long time.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So then there are the four directions, and the four directions have the four elementals. They're undines, gnomes, sylphs, and salamanders. And
Hmm.
I often bring this up because I've had people ask me before, how do salamanders have anything to do with fire? Right? Like, where did that come
Uh-huh.
from?
Um, Give me 1 second. I'm asking the internet's another question.
Okay.
And it will bear on my answer.
Answer. Okay. So,
There we go. Okay.
Silsaver, undines of water,
Hmm.
salamanders of fire, gnomes of earth.
So have you ever looked at some of the old spells, like from the old grimoires? And it's been like you have to gather like graveyard dust under the moon, a new
Right.
moon in Pisces, right?
Right.
So there are tons of these grimoires going around. They're all over the internet. They were super popular in the 90s and the early 2000s when the internet was first being birthed. Well, here is the hidden secret of all that. In Greek medicine, where a lot of like modern Wicca draws on mainly Greek and Celtic backgrounds with a bit of Norse thrown in there as well. Um, Once upon a time, medicine was humoral. So you had the
Right.
four humors: earth, wind, fire,
Uh-huh.
air, and water, all that. I think that was five and I doubled one up. But anyway, much like pranic or Chinese or Oriental medicine is today, they have the humoral systems. It's the balance of these humors. And when things are out of balance is when you get illness. And like even wind, like if you're in too cold a wind, that's a pathogen. So the Greeks had this same system. And over time, as medicine really began in its infancy, it moved away from the gods and became more about like finding natural cures for things. There were these really elaborate medical systems. And there was a writer by the name of Galen, Galen. And Galen wrote these incredibly complex recipes for healing things. Um, and all of those recipes, all that those concepts moved into the Middle Ages at the same time with the Crusades, and you had a bunch of alchemists. So alchemistry. So chemistry comes from alchemy, al apostrophe chemy. All of those refugees from the Near East flooded into Europe. And so you had these Greek systems, and then you had these alchemists who were the underpinnings of the modern scientific method coming together. And so you have these very complicated, high ceremonial, magical recipes. And from that, these giant tables of associations were made.
Hmm.
So there's also something called the Doctrine of Signatures, which is an actual book. So why are kidney beans called kidney beans?
They're shaped like kidneys.
They're shaped like kidneys. And that is literally how the Doctrine of Signatures works. And this is the basis of all medieval medicine. So if you, St. John the Conqueror's root, for instance, what is it associated with? The sun.
Hmm.
Because St. John the Conqueror is associated with the sun, and this root, because of various little attributes, is associated with the sun because it grows in sunny places and it's harvested during a time of the summer. So
Hmm.
that's literally how these medicinal systems work. And that's also where we get undines, gnomes, and sylphs. These are part of ceremonial magic's associations of the elements. And if you'll notice, like undines, sylphs, all that, these come out of Greco-Roman language. That's
Hmm.
because culturally, that's where those associations came from.
Right. And this also has to do with there's a great book called The Elizabethan View. If you ever have a
Mhm.
chance to read it, it's a little tiny book. It doesn't take long to read. And it's written by someone in the 19th century. And the Elizabethan View talks about the ladder of being. And the ladder of being takes everything that's known to man and puts its importance on this ladder, and sylphs, undines, gnomes, and salamanders of fire are up there in the heavens as having magical association or
Mhm.
angelic association versus earthly association on this ladder of being. So the ladder of being was very, very important. You had to know where man stood on the ladder of being. You had to know where the angels stood on, and then the various angels stood on the ladder of being. The ladder of being was really how they quantified their world at the
Mhm.
time of the Elizabethan era. And if you're going to understand some of these old grimoires, or if you're going to understand old hermetic magic, understanding the ladder of being and the Elizabethan view of
Mhm.
the world, the Elizabethan worldview, is very, very important. And it's something that's well worth your time to look into if you're very interested in the structure of alchemy from that time, Hermeticism, all of that. You really want to read that book. It's a really great book. The Elizabethan Worldview is one that I would definitely pick up. And because of that worldview, it gives it denotes the four directions. And I am going
Mhm.
to the four directions as we understand it in importance today is done cardinally. So air, fire, water, earth. But according to the ladder of being, it's actually earth. Hang on, earth, water. Oh! I have some. I was gonna show something and it fell.
That
Let me
sounded
try
so
again.
expensive.
It really wasn't. It just it scared me. Earth, air.
Remember when I said she has dramatic reactions, guys? You
Okay,
You
so
just got
this
to
is it.
experience one.
Can you see that? This is
Yeah.
earth, water, air, and fire. I'm sorry, I'm a shaky person
Hmm.
today. That is the order on the ladder of being of the elements,
Hmm.
right? So you have to understand that they had an importance. Earth was least
Yep.
important, fire was most important. And that is not normally how we see it in paganism today. And I just thought it was worth pointing out that that is definitely
Hmm.
in hermetics and in alchemy, and in geomancy, which is what I was holding up, my geomantic dice. There is definitely a difference in how you view them. And also, some people in modern paganism have flipped some of the directions as well. So typically, we give east to air, south to fire, west to water, north to earth. But there are some people who will flip and say east is earth and air is north. And the reason they
Hmm.
say this is very specific. They say this because east is where you start from. We are on the earth. And as we fire our passion from the earth, then we also add in the emotional and mental and spiritual power, and then we send it out into the universe when we get to north as air. So air is the sending out, if you will. And so some people switch these, some people switch various ones. So don't be surprised if you ever go to a circle and someone, and it's not earth, air, fire, and water in the normal cardinal directions. That's not
Hmm.
unusual. You just want to be sure you ask. And the other thing I was going to mention is there's sometimes people will reorient the directions in because of land, uh, the way the land is where they're at. So, for example, I went to a gathering once and there was this huge body of water in the south. And so we just said that that was west because you can't look at west and think fire. You can't look at a huge body
Right.
of water and think fire. You're going to look at that huge body of water and think west anyways. So we rotated the circle so that that was west, regardless of what the cardinal directions were at that place. That's also another common practice. So don't be alarmed if you go somewhere and they
Hmm.
say, there's the ocean. We're going to say that's west, even if it's not west. There's a reason why they're doing that. And it has a lot to do with our ability to associate a direction when we're looking at something else. So, do you have
Right.
anything to say about all that?
I do, because so that's like one half of it. There's another half to it that I was kind of blew me away whenever I first got this concept. And it's not a very common concept, at least that people recognize. So when you have a circle, you are laying the four cardinal directions. Most altars are set up to represent the universe, the world. So the way I learned it, when you're setting up an altar, the altar that I commonly use has the four elements around it, or they're present somewhere on the altar,
Mm-hmm.
in honor. And then there's usually god and goddess, usually like some kind of source candle, something like that. And then all the different tools that you're going to use. That represents your world. That's the
Mm-hmm.
balance of the elements that exists there, and you are laying that in the center of the four cardinal directions so that the magic that you make there is representative in the land that you live. So you are doing sympathetic magic just by doing the ritual. It's layers upon layers of meaning. And so when you look at the geography of Europe and the way these the first Wiccans were putting things together, water is always in the west because the Atlantic Ocean is on the west. To the right were the mountainous regions. You had the Alps and you had the Scandinavia, which tends to be very rocky and all that. Of course, the north is cold, and so that would be air. And then you have the south, which is closer to the equator. It gets warmer the further south you go. And so that's why, like when Dia was talking about shifting the cardinal directions geographically, that 100% makes sense because our default basis is exactly that reason. And it's also a thing to remember what you're doing, what you're pantomiming in ritual is sympathetic magic. You're making something happen in the micro so you can catalyze a macro event.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it was explained to me in those terms, I had
Yeah.
to sit with that one for a minute because it had never been put in those terms before. I had to digest that one.
I think one of the fun things that is an exercise that I was taught to do is to sit in the four directions and try not to have any preconceived notions and see
Hmm.
what it is for you. When you sit
Yeah.
in East, what does East say to you? What do you see about East?
Hmm.
Is it really air or is it some other direction? And why is that? And some
Hmm.
other association. So that's always a fun little thing to do. But in whenever I just for the record, whenever I do a teaching circle, which is all the circles of Willow, we always stick to the wildly accepted
Hmm.
directions, so as not to confuse people. That's basically why we
Yeah.
keep to that. It's not necessarily because that's the directions. The directions are that way in my own personal practice. It's just that that's the way that everybody typically learns them, and I don't want to confuse people.
Right, right,
So
right.
may the circle be opened but unbroken. May the peace of the goddess be ever in your heart. So, where does that come from? May the circle be open but unbroken or never broken.
So when it comes to pagan chants, there is a folklore effect that happens.
Mm-hmm. A folklore
I
effect.
am the folklore effect, yes. I am trying to
If you've never been
da,
to a
da,
group
da.
circle, it's very common that at the end of the circle they say, Merry meet, merry part, and may the circle be open but never broken. Merry meet, merry part, merry meet again. It's very
Hmm.
common to end a circle in that way. It's so common that I have been at gatherings where they didn't try not to do that, and people did it spontaneously because it's that common.
Hmm.
So just so you know,
Yeah.
May the circle be open, but never broken. Merry meet, merry part, merry meet again is very common.
Hmm. So when I talk about the folklore effect, I learned this from one of my last teachers. It was deeply in the SCA, and there's a lot of what's called filks. So filks are taking like okay, Silent Night, which is a well-known Christian hymn. You can take it and instead of Silent Night, Holy Night, and then it goes on, all is calm, all is bright. Um, you change the words to be more pagan. That's called a filk, and that's part of the folklore effect. When you take a song or a hymn and people start singing it, there's this natural game of telephone that happens because human memory is inherently creative. Like we shape memories into a different shape every time we access them. So this song, according to the internet, and something I vaguely remember from years and years ago, "May the Circle Be Open but Unbroken" is widely attributed to Robert Gass. Um, it's a variation on the traditional closing, "May the circle be open." Now, there is an old Christian hymn from the turn of the 20th century, "Can the circle be unbroken?" And
Mm-hmm.
so when you are taking people who started out as Christian or some other religion and you switch, they change their religious association, you're still bringing concepts with them. The concept of an unbroken circle is a very, very old one. And so these songs start, somebody writes a song, and maybe a piece of that very popular song will become something else. And that's where a lot of phrases like this come from. Like "Merry you meet, merry you part, merry you meet again" probably came from a traditional English folk song. That's my understanding of Circle Unbroken. Now, I've heard a lot of variations of this, and honestly, it's one of my favorites. It's simple. Anybody with any level of voice can probably sing this and still carry a tune, unless you're just completely atonal. There's a reason it's so popular.
Yep, I agree. I'm looking at our time and I'm reordering my list so that we look at some things
Okay.
that I want to cover before. So I'm just kind of reordering it a little bit. We didn't mention skyclad, which means
Mm.
to be naked
Hmm.
in a ritual. Isn't that from Stranger to Strangeland too?
It is, but the concept of was older than that. So
Mm-hmm.
so there's two words that are not sky clad that it is very important to understand when you're understanding why this is super important for some Wiccan practices. So there's the word nude, and then there's the word naked. So in a vacuum, these words, naked does not actually necessarily mean clothes. It just means a lack of protection. So you can have a naked expression, which means an unguarded expression. Nude means you're not wearing clothes. So nude is simply unclothed. It has no connotation of protection needed. Naked is the most common term used today because in our society, we are taught that the human body is a thing of judgment and ridicule. It is an unclean thing. And we're taught, even those of us who are in the pagan world, to have all these self-consciousnesses about it, these insecurities. And so nude and naked, you have to understand the difference between the two to understand why skyclad is so important. Now, for me, not going skyclad had less to do with body insecurities, of which I definitely had many in the early days, and more to do with the pterodactyl-sized mosquitoes that existed in Florida like 94% of the time. I have had a giant mosquito bite welt in very sensitive places. I will never repeat that experience.
Tony has had ticks in very sensitive places.
Oh,
Freaked
yes.
him out so bad.
As well
And that
it
was the
should.
last time that he was wearing a kilt, hence why this happened in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
he stopped wearing kilt in a traditional manner after that because he was so
Yes.
worried about it.
I don't know if there are ticks in the Highlands of Scotland. It may be too cold for them. That's
For
something
them,
that
I would
bears some
imagine.
research.
I would imagine. I also want to go over, since we're talking about Nike, the Great Rite, the symbolic Great Rite, and the chalice
Mm,
and the blade, which are all kind of terms that kind of interrelate to each other. The chalice
hmm
means the cup, the actual sacred cup that we use in ritual. The blade means the athame or the athame, as we've previously
hmm
discussed. And the reason this is important is because they use the cup and then they take the blade and they put the blade into the cup. And that is the symbolic great rite. It is the simulating uh, giggity or spicy sleep.
hmm
That's why it's called symbolic because it's nobody's actually
hmm
doing it. It's symbolic. And then the actual great rite is not symbolic. They actually do spicy sleep,
hmm
and that is actual done and publicly in some rituals. In fact, I used to go to a pagan event where they would have uh, like you had to be vetted to go into their ritual because they actually did the actual great rite and they were trying to keep out pervs from going in there.
hmm
So those terms I definitely wanted to make sure we went over: the chalice and blade, the great rite, the symbolic great rite. All of those
hmm
are very important. Do you have anything to say about those three?
I do. For those who are just coming into Wicca, the relationship with the Great Rite and those metaphors and archetypes, if you are coming into it now versus 30, 40, 50 years ago, there are some different cultural connotations. We have had many a revolution and movement that has changed our understanding now. So when Revdia is talking about they would do the great rite, she is not in general talking about a giant orgy. She is talking about a divine union between the priest and the priestess, that is the coming together of the masculine and the feminine, the god and the goddess. Now, wherever your stance on it is, and I certainly have no intention of engaging in the great rite. I don't think that that is necessary. But wherever you stand on it, that is the cultural context. It's not meant to be just a giant bacchanal. There is a lot of context and association to it. So I would definitely suggest doing some research on it because it's got a long history, good and bad. And knowing knowing all the intricacies of that is probably a really good idea before you make, any kind of judgments because it's got a long history. And that's
Um,
that's all I had on that one.
yeah, if you want to actually see a really interesting great rite that is family friendly, watch King Knight with Matthew Gray Grubler from 2022. It is it is a story and a movie that mostly pagans will get the jokes. You watch it and go, how does anybody else understand these jokes?
Yeah.
because because it is definitely pagan esque. I mean, it's about a coven, and it's very interesting. And they have the actual great rite and kind of show how it's more sacred in the movie. It's very interesting thing to watch. King Knight with Matthew Gray Gubler, 2022. Check it out. It's a really, really good watch. I love that movie. I've seen it a couple of times. Um, After that, we have Widdershins and Deosil. Now, these do have Old English connotations, right?
Hmm. Yes. So, okay. So, Widdershins and Deosil, which, if you're pronouncing it, my understanding, I could be very wrong because any of the Celtic languages is a dance between consonants and vowels. Deosil is actually pronounced Jeshel.
Okay.
That's what I was told. I have not verified it. So DSL means to go sunwise. Widdershins means to go counterclockwise. Now DSL, when I read it, looks like it comes from the Greek dio, like it would be connected to the sun. So I don't know if it's Greek or if it's actually Celtic, but they are old English words for sunwise and counter sunwise. And those are the directions, like you're building energy when you're going diasil, you're taking the circle down and releasing energy when you're going Widdershins.
Right. And this becomes very popular because of Lady Gwen Thompson's poem, The Wiccan Reed, the
Mm-hmm.
long form. She actually says Deosil by the waxing moon, Widdershins by the waning moon. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think that's right. So that's why it becomes popular in pagan culture. And then the last one I wanted to make sure we covered was cone of power. This is the term that's kind of fallen out of favor in paganism, but it actually means when a coven creates a power that looks like an upside down cone. So it's if a funnel, if you will. So the bottom is big where all the people are standing, and it gets smaller as it goes up, and that's called the cone of power. And the cone of power is what is directed typically in traditional Wicca by the high priestess. She directs it where it's going to go. And this is why it's important when you go to visit someone, if you're going to raise energy, the naming of where that energy is going to is very important. So you should have the high priestess say, we're going to raise this energy for resilience for these people. And the rest will go to the earth to heal her. So they should say something like that. If they're going to have you raise energy, you always want to make sure. I don't know where the cone of power originally comes from at all. Do you?
So I have my suspicions. So the cone of power, I don't actually remember if it was ever mentioned by Gardner specifically, but it really strikes me as a kind of Golden Dawn Telema Freemason concept. When you were dealing with ceremonial magics, they really like diagrams and flowcharts and very specific, complex reasons for things. So the flow of these energies is very important. And I have a feeling Cone of Power kind of came out of that mindset. And it was just a way of describing how, when a group raises that energy and the priest and priestess, whoever, whatever tradition is directing it, it's a visual way of describing that. Now, I do have a story about the Cone of Power, a
Okay.
wonderfully socially traumatic story about the Cone of Power.
Okay.
I have had some wonderful teachers in my time, and none of them were as wonderful or as awkward or as kind and loving as my good friend Reverend Luke. And Reverend Luke said we should do a Samhain gathering, and I offered to host because I have an inability to say no. It's gotten better with time. I've been in treatment for it for a long time, but so I come over, and in his way, Luke was an hour and 45 minutes late. So by the time he arrived, we had already done everything, but he had brought some people with him that he wanted to see this event, this cone of power. I lived in suburbia. I had neighbors just literally over a tiny privacy fence. They were less than 20 feet from my house. Luke had a very healthy set of lungs. And so we have this fire going in the back. And there are four people. including the very tall, gangly Reverend Luke, in full hippie with like the long golden hair and the sandals and all that around this fire. And he's going around and he's got one hand up and one hand down, and he looks like he's making an awkward little airplane. I just realized how white I am. And as he's going around, he's going, cone of power, rise higher and higher. And it is at the top of his lungs. And I am surrounded by college students on every side. There were 4 frat guys who were renting a house right behind us, and they had been outside day drinking for about 11 hours, and they were sloshed, and Luke inspired them. And by the time all was said and done, there was this wonderful echo of cone of power, rise higher and higher. And I was in the corner hiding my face because I knew that I could never face any of them again. And thank God they were all college students and they were gone within a semester. But Luke came over and he was so proud of himself. And I'm just like, yes, Luke, you did a thing. I'm so proud of you. My roommate looked at me like W, T, and F. And I'm like, that's a thing that happened in this world. So, yeah.
Litha, you just reminded me. At Litha, we were calling the 4 elements, and we don't mean to do it loud, but you're right. I'm in suburbia, and my neighbors are very close, and I can't help it. And some kids over the fence of us started echoing back what we were saying. It was so hilarious. And then you hear an adult come out and go, "Stop that! Don't do that!" I was like, yes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And then we wonder why. Then we wonder why everybody accuses us of trying to sway the children. Like,
and I did look up cone of power according to the God Google, and he does say it's a Gerald Gardner thing, specifically, and that the earliest known reference to it has to do with the New Forest Coven performing a ritual called Operation Cone of Power in 1940 to prevent Hitler's invasion of Britain during World War II.
Oh, you're
it's
right.
One of the most, the earliest references of it evidently is that particular thing.
Which is a really cool story. I don't know if you.
That's a cool story. Yeah, I know the story is allegedly. And there's been some people who've tried to track down if this is a real thing that really happened. And I think they've decided that it really did happen, but not in Gerald Gardner's way, not necessarily. Right. It wasn't just the New Forest Coven. It was actually
it was a bunch of them. Yeah,
a bunch of people can remember being there, going there, having their parents talk about being there, going there. So there was indeed a ritual to dissuade that happened before the Beach of Normandy. So it actually happened just before they were turned back from entering into Britain. So so very interesting story that Gerald Gardner tells, not necessarily his version, but you should look it up. It's an interesting story nonetheless. And that is our time today. We just have too much fun and we go so fast. And there's a whole list of things we didn't get around to, but that's the way it's going to have to go.
Time is arbitrary. It's just, a social construct. We could just go on and on and on.
Well, I do have a director that pleads with me to try to keep it to an hour. We have yet to do that, so I'm really working on it.
For those watching this later on YouTube,
when they tell me keep it to an hour and then it comes out like an hour. Well, what she said was keep it to an hour, but I don't know that I really pay that any attention. Don't ever tell me that. If you're not going to pay it any attention, then neither am I, because why should I?
Slack is dangerous.
But I am
if you
trying.
Give us wiggle.
If you give us a little wiggle room, it's very bad. So we hope you enjoyed common sayings and where they came from and how they're used and what they are. And maybe you've heard some today that you've never heard before and can look those up. I think that really my resiliency corner is to sit into the 4 directions and determine which of the four directions speak to you and what elementals and associations speak to you with the four directions. I think it's a really great thing to do. And I think employing those four directions to help build your resiliency is also a smart thing to do. That's what I would say about Resiliency Corner this week. What about you, Kyler?
I have actually one of my very favorite like grounding and centering, which is some terms we didn't get to today.
Mm-hmm.
Grounding and centering practices actually involve an elemental rebalancing. And depending on what my need is at the time, I will find the element of what I need within each of the elements. So each of the elements have their own like psychology, their own personality. And so like water is the ability to flow. All things can be eroded by water, but it carries our emotions, and it can be a slow stream or it can be a raging river. The earth itself is the foundation. It is timeless and eternal. If you are looking for resiliency, there is the earth. Like there are mountains here, like the Appalachian Mountains are millions and millions of years old. The Appalachians are the same mountain chain as the Scottish Highlands. They've been around since Pangea. So the idea of earth and resilience, of water washing us clean of the hurts and the ills that the world may put upon us, fire burning away our pain or giving us the passion to reignite our resolve, air bringing us the knowledge that we need to navigate our course. Those are little prayers, and even little physical things that I do every day. Like sometimes I need to remind myself to wash clean, and I'll drink a glass of cool water, which we should be hydrating anyway, because it's summer and it's hot. So, yep, that is my contribution to Resiliency Corner today.
Great. And I always end with have a magical day. Kyler, what do you have to say?
Have a most blessed day,
So mote
and
it be.
so mote it be.
Smote it.
Desolate smoke.
Thank you for listening to Urban Unwitches. Please reach co-host Kyler Petrie and Rev Dia at urbanunwitches@gmail.com. That's urbanunwitches@gmail.com to suggest topics for shows or comment on past episodes. Please join our Discord channel, Urban Unwitches Podcast. Follow us on TikTok at Urban Unwitches. Follow us on YouTube at Urban Unwitches to watch all episodes. And listen to all our past podcasts on your favorite podcasting platform. Rev Dia is a witch for hire as an officiant, life coach, astrologer, geomancer, and medium, and can be reached at www.revdia.net. See you next time. Thank you for joining us on the Circle Podcast, presented by Circle Sanctuary, and produced for all who follow nature-centered paths. Join us throughout the week for various programming connecting with the community around the world. Please don't forget to watch for updates on the Circle Sanctuary website at www.circlesanctuary.org. Follow us on Facebook at Facebook.com/Circle Podcasts. We can also be found on your favorite podcast hosting sites, such as iTunes, Spotify, and others. Until next time, many blessings.